So I'm about to tell my Miss Major story. So I had a chance to meet Miss Major twice in my life, but the first time I met her, the introduction was off the chain. So I'm not gonna name people. I'm not gonna name a lot of people in here because this was at a conference and we were in a workshop. And so I'm not gonna name people because I feel like it was a vulnerable moment and it was a growing moment. Um, we were in different places in our lives. Some of us were early into the movement on such a national scale. This was after the tipping point, right after, Laverne had made her debut on the cover of Time magazine. And this was my first trans centered conference. I will say that it was in Philly, and it was a trans conference that was once ran by a black trans woman, but a lot of things happen and things change hands. But anyway, this was my first and last conference that I would attend pre-op, because I hadn't had my orchiectomy before the conference, but I literally left this conference to go and have my sex change, to go and have gender reassignment surgery. So this was a pivotal moment, like me meeting Miss Major right before I was going to have my sex change. So we're in this big workshop, and the topic was accountability. And one of the people was being held accountable for drastically mismanaging funds. And I can relate to that in my own personal life. Being given resources, personal resources though, and drastically mismanaging funds. But anyway, the person who was being held accountable had drastically mismanaged about $30,000 and was being held accountable for the mismanagement of the funds. And at first they was, because they had earned a master's degree, so they was using, big words, $25 words. They was putting it on and pontificating and the psychosis of the process, and and the malicious intent of the and it was intensifying the calligraphy. It's a whole bunch of big ass word salad, bitch. So anyway, they thought it wasn't getting them anywhere, and the person who was holding them accountable was just unrelenting. Now, both of the people who were arguing with each other were Pisces, and Pisces is a water sign, and baby, Pisces can start a hurricane in a minute. So it was a hurricane of emotions that started whipping through the space, and it had to have been somewhere between 60 or 80 people in the room. It was not a small crowd. It was a nice number of people in the room. So the person who was holding the other person accountable about drastically mismanaging funds just kept going in, just kept attacking, just because you did this with the money, and you should have did this, and you should have did that. And so finally the one who was using the $25 word said, fuck that shit. You know I was fucking homeless, bitch. You know where the nigga came from, bitch. Somebody said she should have led with that. Anyway, this escalated the situation even more. So now the people who are on the side of the one who is being held accountable are getting hostile, and the people who are on the side of the one who's holding her accountable, people are slanging slurs and slanging words, and people standing up ready to go. People is like, it's almost like a war about to break out. People being real combative, it's a witch hunt, all these things are happening simultaneously in the room. And just when you thought things was about to get real violent and real ugly, the double doors of the conference room bust open, and they push Miss Major in. Look at Miss Major saying, hey. And they push Miss Major in a wheelchair. And Miss Major say, "Is this what we bought? Is this what we suffered for? Is this what we paid for?" Yes, it was a real life Cicely Tyson moment. And what did not make it no better was a beautiful, heavy set, beautiful skin, thick flowing hair, trans girl stood up and started singing, "Pray on just a little while longer. Pray on." Yes, it happened. It happened. I was there. I'm not making it up. And between them strolling Miss Major around in that wheelchair, and between that girl singing with that beautiful voice, sounded way better than me. But between the combination, everybody calmed down. It was like, this was when I really started to understand Avatar. Even though the series was anti-black as fuck, I learned a lot from it still. Thank you, God Goddess. A lot of times we think that manipulating the elements is about manipulating actual fire. It's about manipulating actual water. It's about manipulating actual air or actual earth. There are beings who can do that, and I'm sure beings who do that, either it's just a natural inherent ability, but the ones who work at it probably are not as attached to reality as it is, because there's so many spells and so many things we have to unpack and unlock in our minds, so many binders and blocks that have been placed in our mind. But one thing that reigns true, those elements exist in all of us. And that's why some of us are centered in earth. We are earth signs. Some of us are centered in air. We're air signs. Some of us are centered in fire. We're fire signs. Some of us are centered in water. We're water signs. And, then we have all of these complexities that go on in even that, because all of these signs exist in us. We are a combination of all the elements. And so when beings can calm a human storm of emotions, when people are raging and rioting and going wild, and people can come in and transmute that energy, alchemize that energy, and bring people to peace, help people to find calm, when people can calm the waves inside of us, when people can calm that fire inside of us, when people can calm that air that's turned to wind inside of us, when people can stabilize that earth that is quaking inside of us, that's working with the elements right there. That was my first peek into, and I didn't realize that my whole life this is what preachers have been doing. This is what politicians do. This is what musicians do. I'd never really seen it up close and personal from a trans person. Sometimes you have to see it. You know it's possible, because when I was 17 years old, I had a moment where I alchemized and transmuted space like that. It was 1,700 children, and they were laughing at me when I walked out on the stage. But by the time I finished my poem, I got a standing ovation. And so my introduction to Miss Major was a shifting point for me right before I was going to have my sex change, that reminded me and helped me to remember the power of our being, the power of our personhood, because people was in that workshop losing their mind. Things had escalated. Things were so heightened. And baby, when I tell you, between the trans woman singing and Miss Major's presence, the power of her presence, it brought peace and calm where storms were raging inside of a multitude of beings. And the next time I saw her, it was nice. I just gave her a hug, and she saw me. Like, she always had kind and nice things to say to me. You know, I never took a picture with her. I got a picture with everybody else. Maybe somebody else have a picture of me with her. But I never worried about taking a picture with her. I just was happy to be next to her, happy to be in the space with her. You know, and she always saw me. Like, she always saw me. She always saw my potential, and she always let me know that. And so, that's my Miss Major story. Dwell in power and purpose. And thank you for your love, your life, and your legacy. Lelem Lele Nation, Purple Ones, rise.